You're listening to episode 63 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, Laurie and I are revisiting expert interviews surrounding relationships with food. We'll break down some important points in regard to emotional eating and disordered eating. We'll give you our takeaways, things we learned, and some personal experiences in dealing with the emotions accompanying eating. We'll also give you the results from our Instagram poll, and we'll share anonymously what others had to say about their relationships with food. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Laurie Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health, with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I am so happy to be recording with Laurie again. We are planning to do this a lot more often. We were talking off air that we just feel like there's such a sense of lightness. We're excited to record together. We don't have that get in the mode of recording. And I told her sometimes I would have a nervous stomach before recording guests and having to keep to a tight schedule. It just feels so light for us right now, and we're excited to be delving into some of these topics coming up in the next few weeks.
So today, Kim and I are doing what we said we were going to do and kind of revisiting some interviews that we've done. And, we did a big cluster of guest interviews and expert interviews on the show. And there was so much information and it was all just so good. But we need to dig back into it and kind of break it down. And both of us, have things we wanted to share about the information, from the guest interviews. So we're going to do our first one today, and we're going to continue to do this in some future episodes too. But today we're going to be looking at really our relationship with food. That's kind of the focus of this episode today. And it's revisiting two interviews that I did. One was on emotional eating, and one was on eating disorders. And both Jessica and Melainie had such great information and such great perspective, and totally experts in the field for what they do and helping so many people overcome these issues, which are very scary. And, a huge part of our population struggles with this. And I know that because I'm out there in the world working with women. And, through my coaching practice, I see, there's some things that, the roots just run really deep on some emotional issues around food, that just changing your food and, working on your exercise, like those things can't always fix some of the emotions and the just going back to that relationship that you have with food that started from the time you were a child. So it's not an easy fix, but it can be changed, it can be shifted, it can be healed. And these two guests really dug into how they do that, and how they work with people to just get them to the other side. And these topics are so important to me because I'm raising teenage daughters. I was a teenage girl once myself. I feel like it wasn't all that long ago, but I guess it was. I just turned 44 last week. So, I mean, boy, it's been a long time since I was 14. But the stuff that my daughter's going through, I feel like I just went through it yesterday, honestly. Which I guess is good. I'm young at heart. But some of it's really fun and exciting, like butterflies in your stomach, kind of fun teenage stuff. And some of it not so fun that I wouldn't want to go back to. But the food thing is a real problem. I mean, I remember a lot of girls in my school having full-blown eating disorders and I remember at the time, I'm talking in the 90s, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Kim, too. It was like not cool to, first of all, it wasn't cool to buy the school lunch, but it wasn't cool to
Right.
like pack your own lunch either. Like we do now, like kids bring healthy lunches to school, and it's like accepted. But I know when I was in high school, all we did was get pretzels from the vending machine.
I know. I barely ate lunch and I was so starving by the end of the day.
Pretzels from the vending machine, like
Mhm.
zero nutritional value, salt,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
bread. I mean, that's all we ate, that and maybe some water at lunch. And that's what we all did like every day. So, that was, we thought we were doing the right thing because it's fat free, right? Like
Yeah.
that was the craze. But boy, just completely nutrient void. And then I would come
Mhm.
home and eat my face off once I got home.
Mhm. Oh,
I would
yeah.
eat everything in sight. I think I'd make a whole box of Kraft macaroni and cheese and eat it. And my mom just told me a story just a couple weeks ago that I don't even remember. But I guess my cheerleading coach must went to my mom, and I was super thin. I just was lanky and thin, and I was blessed that way. I guess I really never, especially in high school, tried to diet. If I did, it was more like just from a standpoint of fitting in, and doing what my friends are doing. But again, I would come home and like eat like a crazy person because
Mhm.
I was just not eating during the day to be like my friends. But I guess my cheerleading coach asked my mom about it and said she's really thin and, like keep an eye on her for an eating disorder, which I think we all
Oh,
have a
wow.
story like that. And my mom was like, I think she's fine. She comes home from school and eats a whole box of Kraft macaroni and cheese every day. Like, and
Yeah.
not saying that that's good either, but, it's just, we all have a story like that. So,
Right.
and I, again, worry about my daughters as we head into these next few years because this can really follow you through the rest of your life. So I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I look to these experts to guide me and help me to guide and help them navigate
Right.
these years and create a healthy foundation for the rest of their life. So, it's not just women too. Men deal with this as well. They have stress just the same as we do. And they rely on food sometimes, to kind of ease their troubles. I don't want to say it's just women. That's just who I work with most of the time. And I'm a woman and I have daughters. And so that's, I get real wrapped up in that. But I don't want to leave out those men because, this is a good episode for them to listen to as well because we as humans all struggle with this.
Yeah, we really do. I think what you're saying, that these experts are so helpful because they help to give us an opportunity to talk about things and to give us the verbiage we need, because sometimes it can be so confusing.
Mhm.
And, I think we've all probably had some form of disordered eating at some point in our lives. And whether it's become a habit or not is one thing. But just to be able to provide the platform in which to have a conversation so that, also that so you can direct a loved one to a podcast episode or to someone's website or whatever, so that it's not, doesn't have to be coming from mom or, even from a friend, but just like, oh, I heard this, or this is what this person said. I think it can be so helpful for all of us. In preparation for this interview, I put a poll, and I just only did it on my personal Instagram page just to make it a little bit more manageable. I did have quite a number of people that participated, and I was polling just to see kind of like what their relationship with eating was. And so some of the questions were about stress eating, addiction to sugar, skipping meals, and that kind of thing. So I want to share with you right now some of the results of the polls because I think it's pretty interesting. So, of those who responded to the polls, 83% of people said that they stress eat sometimes. So, it is not just, you know, people that may be struggling with eating disorders or whatever. I think we all can turn to food at times. And whether you can monitor that or not is one thing, but sometimes it can snowball and it can turn into disordered eating. But I just thought that was really interesting that 83% did that. 64% of people feel like they are addicted to sugar. 60% of people skip meals at times. 24% of those polled have suffered from an eating disorder in the past. And so, that percentage seems small in comparison to the others, but that's a quarter of the people that I polled that they did have an eating
Mhm.
disorder. And I think I mentioned on like the same slide, um, I listed things like anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, and orthorexia, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But those are all considered, eating disorders. And the last was 63% of people say that looking at other social media accounts makes them feel less than. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit about social media and its role in how we feel about ourselves, and perhaps in its role in how we eat as well. And then I had an open-ended question I just asked, and I said to everybody that I would keep this anonymous. So I'm not going to be talking about anybody's names or anything. But one open-ended question was, what are some reasons that you might eat when you aren't hungry? The overwhelming popular response was that they're bored. And then I also got responses like, I'm lonely, or everyone else is snacking, so I unknowingly start to eat. Someone said, I haven't had enough water. I am unsatisfied. And I thought that was interesting because that could mean different things. Like, you're unsatisfied because you haven't had enough food, or you're unsatisfied with your life. It's kind of like
Mhm.
a deeper thought, but could probably mean both things. Someone said blood sugar imbalance. I love the taste of food. I'm studying. I am sad, stressed, or I'm doing it for social reasons or fear of missing out, FOMO. Someone said that they might eat when they're feeling overwhelmed and stressed. So very interesting. And then another open-ended question that I posed was, why might you skip a meal? And again, there was an overwhelming response that people just said that they're busy. So I think we all get that. Sometimes you are so busy that you just don't have time to eat breakfast, for example, or sit down for lunch. So I think we get that. But then some of the other responses were that they had poor planning. I guess didn't plan maybe to pack their lunch. Someone also said that they're rushed, and I come second to my kids, and I forget to pack my own lunch. Busy mom life was one. Someone said I always forget. Someone said that I'm working 12-hour shifts, and maybe they just don't have a moment to sit down or don't have that break, which isn't fair. But and somebody said I don't have enough time. And only one person said that I'm not hungry and I might be intermittent fasting, which I kind of thought might be more prevalent, because I know for me, a lot of times if I skip a meal, it is intentional now. I mean, there have been times, of course, I totally get the busyness that has happened to me, especially when my kids were babies and toddlers. But only one person mentioned the intermittent fasting. So I thought those were pretty interesting.
Definitely. I love that people participated, and again, it's just something that affects us all in one way or another. So,
Mhm.
really, really interesting feedback. I love that.
Mhm. And I think it's interesting that a lot of people did make the connections between their, like, emotions too, and eating patterns too. For example, like the stress or just like the busyness of their day. Your emotions are tied into your busyness too. You're feeling that stress and feeling so rushed that you feel like you can't sit down. So I think that's going to tie into what we're talking about with emotional eating as well.
Yeah, definitely. So the interview that I did with Jessica, who does, retreats around this topic, where she takes women, to a safe space, and they really dig in to, I mean, they go back as far as they need to go back to emotions. And, she says in her interview, like, emotions are so big. And like, even just stress, to use that as an example, like, that's just such an intermingled ball of a bunch
Mhm.
of emotions. So she starts to unravel all this stuff little by little, and her process is a written process. And she loves to do it in a retreat setting because they have more time. You need time, and you need space, and you need to like, to use her terms, to feel safe, so she creates this very safe environment for women to and she creates the process, and kind of communicates the process. So it's very guided, but it just also is very individual and customized to the person. But you know, she talks so much about, eating mindlessly being an issue and like stuffing down feelings. And for her, she was an emotional eater, a big chunk of her life. And she has completely healed and come out on the other side. And she's helping other women to do that. But, she talks about like stuffing down feelings. And like we are literally, when you think about that, like putting food in your mouth to stuff down those feelings that you don't want to feel. So it's like almost numbing and
Yeah.
but then it creates other feelings, right, Kim? Like after you've done that, gosh, like then the guilt sets in and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean that you're stuffing down whatever you don't want to feel, but then it's creating other negative feelings. So it's a very, very vicious cycle. But she talks about, how deep those roots can go, and that there's a lot of things we can do that just kind of cut it. She does, this whole analogy with a garden where you can like cut the weeds, at the soil level,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine for a little while. But if you don't get the roots out, they're going to just keep growing back. So, her process really goes down to the roots and gets it from the root of the issue, which again, the process is the same for everybody, but the end result and what that root consists of for everybody is different. So it's kind of figuring that out for yourself and, really starting to take a look at your whole life from childhood all the way through, your adult life and just kind of dissecting all that. And she recommends a written process, so journaling. Her process she's called digesting emotions. And I love that. I love that because she talks about when she was a kid and even, through teenage adult years, like all the hours that she spent on the therapy couch, and that, sometimes they all said feel the feels and feel the emotions, and that was scary to her because she felt like if she really felt these feelings, she might not be able to function. Like they'd be so
Mm-hmm.
disabling because they were so intense. So her process is recognizing them and moving through them. So you're not getting stuck in them and feeling like you can't go on and hopeless. Like, that's bad. So
Mm-hmm.
um it doesn't seem food related, but it 100% is
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
yeah, once you work through this stuff, then you can rebuild, healthier habits and just a better, just be in a better place. And her big thing is just eat and move on. So, Kim, what
Yeah.
resonated with you when you listened to the interview with Jessica?
So I did go back and listen because, I hadn't done the interview and I wanted to make sure that I was really like paying attention to, what she said. Um, and like you said, it's just really intense. And one of the first things I thought was, why do we emotionally eat? Like, what is the reason? You talked about these emotions. But I think, like, for me, what I was thinking all along was like, we're just seeking comfort of some sort and an escape.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of trying to like either you're escaping those emotions or you're trying to make yourself feel better. And what can you do is like, that's why we call them comfort foods, right?
Yeah.
Because there is some sort of comfort that we get from them. It's just that when we aren't addressing the emotions, we keep turning to comfort food. And that's never really addressing I guess, the root issue. And then it got me thinking, so why do we choose the foods that we do? It's not like we're binge eating broccoli and chicken, right? I mean, it's not like good for you stuff. So we're reaching for those comfort foods, the things that are easily digested, that are crunchy maybe, and that provide quick sugar to the brain. So, and like more importantly, I think with those like kind of refined carbs and sugars and stuff, they do give our brain a serotonin boost. So there is some, biochemical reasons. So, just those refined carbs. And what I'm talking about is like the pretzels, the chips, the crackers, like the things that you can get quickly, candy even. Um, But then it becomes a vicious cycle because we do get comfort from those foods and we do get a boost. We do feel happier temporarily, but it
Mhm.
doesn't last because we haven't really solved any issues. We've just, gotten this temporary boost. So then we have to keep returning in this vicious cycle. Um, and those foods are addictive, like I mentioned, because of some biochemical reasons and reactions. They do increase our blood sugar, giving us that sugary boost. And they, increase our insulin, though, which is the mechanism by which we clear the sugar from our bloodstream. So then our blood sugar drops again, and we do need more. And so we're getting the serotonin boost. We want more of that, but we just can't seem to break away because it's just, like I said, it's a vicious cycle and we're never addressing the root problem. And it made me think of personally in college when I was an English major, and so I had to type many, many papers, and I would binge eat something. Like usually my choice was jelly beans, which now sounds so gross to me that like I can't even wrap my head around doing that. But I would do that. I'd buy like a bag of jelly beans and I'd be like just chomping. Like I would down the whole bag. Um, I think I was anxious about getting it done and doing it well, but then the sugar fed my brain too. So it helped temporarily again, but I always felt terrible afterwards. I always had that crash, which is dangerous because it leaves you wanting to feel better again. And that can make you return to those foods again for comfort. So then I started thinking, like, how do we solve it? Excuse me. You have to either try to work through those emotions, like digest them, as Jessica mentioned, but also just try to get your brain off of it through distraction. So you can either talk through it, and try to get to the root of it, or just distract yourself for some time. And it has to be a way other than food, if we're going to try to not sabotage. So things like going for a walk are really good. We've mentioned TV before just to kind of take your mind off of it, or even
Mhm.
just like calling a friend can be good because then you can sometimes get to the heart of the issue, and you don't have to delve into it, right away, or just getting those comforting words, even if you're not exactly talking about what's going on, but just having that camaraderie with someone who understands you. And then if you feel like opening up, then you can. But moving through those emotions, like Laurie was talking about, moving through those emotions when you're ready, I think is, at the heart of that emotional eating. I thought that was such a good episode that you did with her.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. She had, it was funny because some of the things she was talking about were newer concepts to me, and I kept trying to like point back to an emotion. I don't know if you picked up on that, but when I listened to it, I was kind of
Mm.
laughing at myself because she'd be talking about a situation that happened, and I'd be like, so the emotion in that situation was boredom, and that's what made you do it. And then later she was talking about another situation. I'm like, and that emotion was stress, and that's what made
Yeah.
you
I thought
emotional
that was
eat.
really helpful. That was very helpful. No,
Well,
I
she
do
was
because
kinda like I think at one point she was like, "Yeah, you're not getting this, like, you're not getting this." Like, if you can't just tie it back to, like, "Okay, that was just boredom," like, it's not that simple, is kinda what she was
yeah.
saying. So, I started to catch on as we made our way through, but maybe that's what everyone was thinking, so I guess that's
Mhm.
good. But, yeah, that was just me trying to get on the same page.
No, I understand, and I mean, I recognize what you're doing, and I thought that was good. It was helpful for me, but I think like you said, what she was saying is, like, it's all a tangled ball,
Yes.
We have so many different emotions going on that, like what you mentioned, there's like, you might be stressed, but then you're feeling the shame and the guilt of eating, and so this is like it just becomes this big jumbled ball, and you don't even know what you're feeling anymore,
Yes, so
you know?
that's like her
Yeah,
dissecting and digesting and, all it's a process. It's not as simple as saying, "Okay, that was boredom and that was stress." Like, no, it's not that easy.
right,
So,
right,
it's really
right.
kinda deep dive. So, we also did an interview, on eating disorders, and Melainie has an eating disorder clinic in New York City. So she is, Jessica is healing people through retreats and, doing this whole written process. And Melainie has a clinic where people come in on all different ends of the spectrum. I'm sure she has some emotional eaters at her clinic as well, because she told me, it's a very big spectrum. It's not just like the full blown eating disorders that we're seeing. We're seeing everyone kind of at every point, which I think is so, so great. But there's a line, right? Like emotional eating is something I think the majority of the population struggles with or has at one point, like 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But the disordered eating and a full-blown eating disorder is kind of like crossing over that line. And she gives us some background on how that happens and why that happens. And she herself, is a recovered eating disorder. I want to say hers was anorexia, I believe.
I think so.
I think that's what she said, but she definitely has made it to the other side and gives the people she works with so much hope just within her story. And hers started out just thinking she was being healthy,
Mm-hmm.
but then it became super obsessive. And she recognizes that now, but at the time, she wasn't recognizing it. In her mind, she was still just being really healthy. And what she said, and I did not know this before our conversation, but it makes so much sense. Like once you get super obsessive like that, and a lot of it's personality, a lot of people have that kind of obsessive type A personality. But when it gets to the point that your body weight dips below where it should be, it almost like shuts something off in your mind where you can't even like
Mm-hmm.
understand reason, and you can't even see that you have a problem, because like you can't think straight almost, because when you don't have you're not at a proper body weight, like you're never, it's just that much harder to come back because you're not seeing it. You can't even be reasoned with. So one of the first things they do in her treatment center is like get people up to a healthy body weight before they even try to work with them and correct any of the habits or the emotional issues around it. Like the first thing they do is get them to a healthy body weight, because you can't even begin to heal until that happens, which was not something that I was aware of. And then she talks a lot about the link between anxiety and eating disorders. And Kim and I did a whole series on anxiety, and in past podcast episodes. And another thing that just so many of us struggle with, and it doesn't leave out anybody. Certainly men have anxiety, kids have anxiety, us women all have anxiety. Like it's it's a real problem. And we kind of looked at it from many, many different perspectives. Um, and those were really, really helpful episodes. But, making this connection between high anxiety and eating disorders was so interesting to me, because it's just one of those things too, where it's just crossing a line, and I guess, the highly anxious people and people with a personality that are just wound very tight all the time, I guess it all feeds in, right, to the obsessiveness, and then
Mm-hmm.
it just seems like it's a vicious cycle, and one thing just feeds the next. And I would say anxiety is an emotion, right? So we're coming back to like the emotional eating, but
Mm-hmm.
taking it kind of next level.
Well, and what I was thinking is when you're talking about anxiety, like there's so many things in life that are uncertain, and that's what causes anxiety. But your food is the one thing you can control.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can lead to, I mean, disordered eating, but then also like that can spiral into the eating disorder, just like controlling the portions you have, or purging, you can control how the food is entering your system, I guess.
That's such a good point. I do think a lot of it comes back to a control thing, for
Mm-hmm.
sure, especially when you've got some things going on in your life that, as you said, you feel very out of control of. But even if not, even if everything in your life is as it should be, it's still like a very type A, control freak. It can happen very easily. I
Yeah.
love that you brought up the control factor, because that's a big deal. So what else
Yeah.
did you pick up from what Melainie said? And
So I kind of I was like taking so many notes because I thought she was just so good, and I sort of like I kind of combined it into like four different kind of areas that I was thinking about. So the first was the forced weight gain, and you mentioned this when you were talking about how
hmm
your brain just shuts down. And so she said that the forced restoration of weight was what she needed in order to heal. She had to like heal her brain first, basically. She was forced to do it. She went into, to therapy, and then she could heal her brain. So what I was thinking is that, some of these young girls, especially who have starved themselves so much, or that are like just so very confused with where they even are now, in their eating disorder, sometimes it takes that loving, responsible adult to force them into therapy, to
hmm
force them into a recovery program, because they are incapable of making those decisions. And then not only that, but on top of that, like our brains aren't fully developed, that like prefrontal cortex isn't developed until you're 25 years old. And so they lack the maturity brain wise, but then they've starved their brain so much that sometimes we have to step in and have an intervention. So I thought that was really interesting that she credited that forced restoration of weight to saving her life. um, and I wrote down a quote that she said. She said, "Forced restoration of weight was responsible for my recovery and mental health as well." So I just thought, our brain needs those nutrients, and we can't think straight or make decisions when they're starved. So we have to start incorporating those nourishing foods into our system again, in order to recover.
yeah.
And then she also talked about social media, and how like back when she was suffering, she talked about, magazines and things, and that like, when you and I were growing up, Lori, we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet even. That's how old we are. But but
Yeah.
I remember looking at magazines when I was in high school and thinking like, why don't I look like that? Like I could never look like that. Like I'm not tall, I am curvy in places that other people aren't. You know what I mean?
And the
It's
social
just
media is so much worse because now we've got these expectations and they're people that we know. So when
mhm,
we were growing up, Kim, we had the magazines, right? Which didn't really seem 100%. I mean, they didn't seem real. Like we knew there were
right,
filters, and just like there is
right.
on Instagram too, there's filters and all of that. But like those were something we looked at, those were a standard. But
Mhm,
we still had a comparison thing, with other girls
mhm,
in our school and in our friend group, and, that still happened, but now it's like taking the level from the magazines and
mhm.
having it be with people we know, and that
Right.
and, like, are interacting with on a daily basis, and boy, that is just some next level, just dysfunction.
It is, because even the people we know, I mean, think about what you post, like even on Facebook or whatever, like you're not posting things that first of all, you don't look good in. You're not going to post about like a fight you had with a friend or your husband or whatever. You know what I mean? You're posting glorious happy moments, and your
Mhm.
children looking fun, like they're having fun, and you look beautiful. And so I mean, we all do it, we choose what we're going to put out there. But for those teenagers, and seeing that, and they're already feeling a sense of insecurity, and like when I say teenagers, I want to make the statement that eating disorders affect every single age out there. It's not just young people. But everything is so unrealistic on social media that if you can't take it with a grain of salt, you really go down this like terrible dark hole. And that's what Melainie mentioned. She just said it's all curated. And what she said was that she spends very little time on her phone, as someone who has recovered from an eating disorder. She said she won't go down that rabbit hole. And she says that if someone makes you feel worse about yourself in any way, then you need to unplug and unfollow. And I completely 100% agree. And that's even if it's someone who is like a friend of yours or someone you maybe admire on Instagram. There are ways of, you don't have to, delete them or unfriend them or whatever. There are ways to And actually the algorithms out there, especially on Instagram, if you're not looking at someone's page for very long, they start putting other people, first in your feed. So, but there are ways to block accounts temporarily, if it makes you feel bad about yourself. I mean, I can feel that looking on Instagram, and it's not even necessarily body image. Sometimes it is, but it's like, oh, this, I feel less than because maybe this person looks like she's a better mother than I am, or her kids eat way healthier than my kids, or you know what I mean? I think we can all kind of go there and resonate with that.
And then the other
Um,
thing too that's happening with social media, that we didn't have to deal with is seeing what everyone else is doing, and like maybe you weren't included, and maybe
yes. Yeah.
otherwise, when we were teenagers, maybe we heard that this stuff was going on, but we didn't have to watch it. Like,
Yes.
you're sitting
Yeah.
at home and you're watching
Mhm.
everyone doing this stuff without you. It just, I don't know, these poor girls and boys. But I go back to teenage girls. It's just, I feel like everything's harder for them in that phase. Um, Especially, I think boys can brush off some of that a little easier. But girls, they just really, really take it hard, and it's just, social media is a big struggle.
Yeah, and I feel like that's why we have to have conversations with our kids too,
Hmm.
just about, and bringing up, even giving voice to feelings that they may not be able to voice, like, or making it as if this is how I would feel, I can understand, why someone might feel this way, or just, giving the words to the kids, even if they can't, or they don't want to talk about it with mom, I guess, because that can be hard too.
Yeah,
But
and their emotions are like such a roller coaster right now too. Like, they don't
mhm,
even, it's so hard for them to communicate them because they don't even understand them. So
right,
as a
right.
mother of teenage daughters, I'm just like buckling in and just going on the ride with them, because now after these podcast episodes, I realize the importance of them feeling their feelings and getting it all out there and
Mhm.
moving through it, and not stuffing them down. But I can tell you what that looks like on a daily basis is really crazy, because they're from one emotion to the next emotion, to like laughing to crying to, I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's crazy, but it needs to happen, and I know that. And thanks to these experts, showing me that, it was such a perfect message for the time of life that I'm in. I needed to hear it, so I so appreciate it.
right. One other thing I was gonna mention, in some ways, this wave of body acceptance, I think, is really nice, that
Hmm.
any size and shape is beautiful. There are, a host of plus size models and, people just like celebrating what their body looks like. I think they get criticized a lot because there are people out there saying, well, if you're overweight, then you're not healthy and this whole thing. But I think the more we can just say that everybody is unique, and like those Dove commercials that they had, with
Yeah.
women of all different shapes and sizes, and how each one was just so beautiful. I love that concept. I wanted to say that also, you mentioned this before about eating disorders and emotional eating. It's on a spectrum.
Hmm.
So, and one thing that stands out for me, and I see this a lot on Instagram, probably because I'm in the health arena, but you might think that you're eating healthy, but that can lead to orthorexia. And I see that people talking about that all the time. So if you're not sure what that means, orthorexia is just an obsessive behavior in pursuit of a healthy diet. So you're trying to eat healthy, but then you become so obsessive over that. Um, so Melainie said in her interview, your healthiest you has to include your mental health. If the way you're choosing to eat is causing you so much stress, that's a red flag. So even if you are healthy and you're trying to, just get in lots of fruits and vegetables and eliminate this and that, but you're stressing over that, that's really not healthy, because our mental health plays a huge role in that. Um, you had talked about the anxiety, and she, in her interview, talked about the anxiety and depression are co-occurring with many eating disorders, so that there are these emotional underpinnings, and that can even relate to not just the anorexia, but again, the orthorexia. You're becoming like so OCD about what's on your plate. And for me, I know a lot about nutrition, and I have definitely gone down that path of creating fear in my own mind. Like some examples would be just worrying about food intolerances. Like I've taken blood tests and shown that I have had food sensitivities. And then I get this feeling of overwhelm, like, oh my gosh, or like depression even. Um, and wanting to not have any of those things on my plate. While, an overt allergy is different than a sensitivity. And so sometimes, and you can work through them, your body can heal, but just knowing so much about that has caused me stress. And knowing about, Lori and I have talked about in our workshops and even on this podcast about foods having pesticides and hormones in them. And so sometimes you can stress about those things, or worrying about nutrient deficiencies. Am I getting enough of these nutrients in? And I need to cut out all this junk food and only focus on nutrient dense things. And so I think like even those in the health sphere who are trying to like help others and be as healthy as they can, we can, it can be tough for us.
Yeah, because you hit
And
a point, and I'm right there with you on this. We're like, you know too much.
now we'd like to take a minute to give a shout out to our show partners, Perfect Supplements and Amazon. Perfect Supplements is a family-owned and operated business that supports local farms. Their superfoods and supplements are non-GMO, third-party tested for purity, and contain no synthetic ingredients, colors, or flavors. They're also organic or wild harvested and fairly traded. Products range from collagen and bone broth powders to plant proteins, greens, desiccated liver, and adaptogenic herbs. Perfect also carries vitamins and supplements from other reputable sources like Just Thrive, Dr. Mercola, Gaia Herbs, Green Pastures, Garden of Life, and Prescript Assist. To check out their wide array of products, go to perfectsupplements.com/Kim. If you use coupon code KIM10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. This is a great way to get superfood nutrition while helping to support our podcast. And just as a disclaimer, it's not the intention of our podcast to provide specific medical advice, but rather to provide you with information to better understand the role of dietary supplements in health. We urge you to consult with a qualified health provider to discuss both the advantages and risks of using dietary supplements. Our other show partner, Amazon, is the largest online warehouse and carries just about everything you need. If you shop on Amazon, which is likely, you can support our show at the same time at no additional cost to you. Simply use our affiliate link to enter the site, then browse and buy, just as you normally would. A Whole New You podcast will make a small commission from your purchase, which helps to support production costs for the show. You can find a clickable Amazon link in the show notes for this episode. You can also go to the products page of our website, awholenewyouPodcast.com, to find the link. If you love our show and appreciate the free information you get each week, please consider buying from Perfect or using our affiliate link when making purchases on Amazon. Now let's get back to the show. I also wanted to mention the fact that Melainie said that this starts at an early age. And she was talking about how kids can have binge eating disorder in ultra restrictive families. So sometimes I think we as moms want to make sure that we are providing the most healthy options for our kids, and we're just trying to make sure they eat all the vegetables and that they're, we're getting rid of all the junk and stuff like that. And ultimately we are responsible for the things that we're bringing into our house. So of course, no one's saying like, don't provide these healthy foods for your kids. But I think when kids start to have fear around food, like I can't touch this or bad's going to happen, or they attach morality to food, like a cupcake is bad. Well, no, it's not bad. It's not the healthiest option. There might be a choice that could help your body grow. On a recent podcast, I can't remember who I was listening to. It was a different podcast than ours, but they were talking about explaining to kids foods that help you grow and foods that don't necessarily help you grow. They might not help you get stronger. They're still a food, and just not to say that something is bad, but just, I think it's important to have conversations with our kids at a very early age about foods that are healthy, and that they can do things for us, like they can make our muscles stronger, or they can give us more energy. So those kind of things. I thought that was an important thing that Melainie mentioned.
And I do think that resonates so much more with kids too, when,
Yeah.
you come at it from that perspective of
Hmm.
how it benefits them, how it can help them at whatever sport they're into, or, just kind of
Yeah.
taking it to their level and making it important to them. And I just
Right.
have to share a quick story on the flip side of just kind of talking about sugar with my daughters, and not necessarily saying like, this is bad, like not trying anyway to create any sort of fear, but also just creating the understanding that, it's making you more susceptible, right, to
Hmm.
getting sick, because, it's breaking down your immune system and suppressing cells. And they are so funny because even though they act like they're not hearing me, my daughter got sick, just like a quick 24-hour thing, after, I think it was after Halloween, and she had just like pounded all kind of Halloween candy, which, they have access to their bags all the time. Like, you hope that they can self-regulate, but I was watching what they were doing. They were not. But when she got sick, she said to me, "Well, I guess I shouldn't have ate all that Halloween candy. It made me
Yeah.
more susceptible." And that word came out of
Ah,
that word came out of my
yeah.
12-year-old's mouth, and I was laughing so hard, but it's like, okay, she heard me, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think, kids can actually feel like when something doesn't feel so good, when something like they've eaten too much, it's giving them a stomach ache, or like you said, maybe they're getting sick in another way afterwards. But also, and when we're not like hovering over them and restricting, because, this is taking it to a whole other level, but we all know that person in college who was like, their parents were so strict when they were in high school, and then they went to college and were like, became like an alcoholic basically, because they were just like finally like free of this restriction. I'm not saying that's going to happen with food, but when we are so restrictive, that's not allowing the kids to have any say in anything. They're people too, and they should be able to make some choices when it comes to their food. And Melanie also talked about allowing them to feel their own hunger. So, it's okay for them to like not eat like all the time. Allow them to feel like when they're hungry, they're going to eat. You don't have to like, force feed them. Don't make them eat every single thing on their plate. And like, they don't have, if they don't like broccoli, it is not the end of the world. You know what I mean? There are other healthy options out there. So just allowing them to feel the feels that they have around food and not shaming them for that.
right, and not being like, "Sit here in this seat until you finish
Yeah.
your dinner. You're not getting up until you've eaten every bite on your
Hmm.
plate." And you know what? Maybe their hunger cues were saying, "I'm
Yeah,
full," and good for them for listening to that, because
exactly.
we don't as adults a lot of times. That's, like,
Exactly.
lost in the noise.
That's exactly right, right, exactly. There's no prize for joining the clean plate club, they don't have to do it. And then just, like, the last thing I wanted to mention, that resonated with me that Melanie was talking about was that, like, our hormones are all tied in to our consumption of food too, so things like estrogen, progesterone, our thyroid, they all need nutrients and especially healthy fats, in order to function properly. So we could be shutting down like even something like fertility if we're not getting enough of that, or a thyroid functioning, which makes you so tired, not able to function in life. You need to have these hormones. And she talks about that eating more consistently helps our metabolic rate. And she really warned against fasting and skipping meals like breakfast, because she talked about, and this makes sense from a science standpoint, but that our cortisol is raised when we are in a fasting state. Our adrenaline raises, and that can mess up our hunger signaling. And I know for me, sometimes, I do like to do some intermittent fasting at times, but I know that if I'm feeling really wiped out, I will not do that, because that's my body's way. And pretty in tune with my body. Not everybody is, but that's just like your body's way of saying, hey, I need some nourishment here. Like your brain needs those calories, needs those fats and things. So I think that it's really important what she was saying is just that, like, you have to know your own body. You have to listen for the cues, and we need to be making sure that we're eating, consistently and getting in those right things in order for us to heal, especially if you have an eating disorder.
Definitely. And I think, to kind of summarize both of their points, although again, it's a spectrum, so totally
Mhm.
different levels of really kind of the same issue. But both Melainie and Jessica talked, about intentional eating. And I really think the key to everything is intentional eating, listening to our bodies and not always our minds. If you think that you're hungry, but, Kim kind of spoke to this a little bit too, but you don't want fruit or veggies or meat, like you're probably not really hungry. You're probably looking for something else.
Mhm.
And primary food is not what you think. I love when I teach workshops in person and I ask, you know, and maybe you can take a minute too here while you're listening to this and think about when you hear the words primary food, what comes to mind? What do you think of? And you may be surprised to learn that primary food is actually not what's on your plate. This is an IIN concept that I learned when I was getting my health coaching certificate, and it's a really big deal. It's your relationships. And those relationships include your relationship with yourself. So, not only are most Americans longing for connection, but this is also where self love and positive self image and even self sabotage come into play. So, a lot of times hunger cues and a need for intimacy in the brain are confused. And self sabotage is one of the biggest factors that keep people from meeting their health goals. I see this all the time in my health coaching practice, and I've experienced it personally. So, just getting really in touch with those moments and, just creating some new habits around that. And really, the first step is recognizing it. And sometimes though, the self-sabotage isn't even our fault. And this is something, that Kim spoke to a little bit as well. Like cravings are a real thing. And honestly, I could spend like a whole episode talking about cravings. But one of the biggest problems with cravings at this point, especially with us Americans, is that the food industry has us addicted to sugar, which really just sets us
Mhm.
up for failure. And sometimes it can take some old fashioned grit, to get us past this one, just to kind of break that addiction on the front end. But also, like deconstructing your cravings in those moments can go a really long way. So, like stopping to ask yourself, what is really going on? And then drink some water, go for a walk, hug a loved one, call a friend, just starting to identify your triggers, calling them out, and finding something else to kind of fill that void, not food. So this really can go a long way to start to turn things around for you. And like just doing the things. Like we all know what we need to do. It's just like the implementation piece that, everything starts to fall apart. But if you just do the things and let go of the expectations and know that this is not the same thing as letting yourself go. There's a big difference there. Because when we go easy with ourselves and we eat because we love our bodies and we want to nourish our bodies, not because we hate them and we want to change them, our relationship with food will start to shift. And that is huge.
I love that. It's so much deeper than just it's just the food. I think that's the big takeaway from this, that we are such complex human beings and we have feelings and we have emotions, and we can't really separate that from food sometimes. Although it needs to be, but sometimes we need a little help with that. So we're really thankful to the guests that have been on our show talking about this. It's been fun for me, and I'm sure for you too, Lori, just to kind of deconstruct this and go through it together, to share some of our personal experiences too. I think that that's an invaluable lesson. And we're looking forward to doing more of this with some other episodes. And so we will be back in 2 weeks from today, and we'll be talking about brain health then, and just kind of breaking apart some of the episodes that we've learned from other expert guests and giving our ideas about brain health too. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmairovich.com. For more from Laurie, go to simplyempoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyou.podcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.